yeah, hua, yeah, ooh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you there, but before we start the video, I have to show you this. So this isn't a product placement, this isn't sponsored. I actually made this knife. I went to a forging class, I went to a blacksmith, and I forged myself a Japanese chef knife. That has nothing to do with this video, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was super cool. And also, it is kind of One Piecey, so it does have something to do with this video. If you look, and you need more proof that I did it, it says onigiri right there, which is a pun because, firstly, it's a Japanese chef knife, and onigiri is Japanese food, but also because of that pun that Zoro has when he does his stuff with his sword. So I've named it both after the pun of Zoro's sword and after the Japanese food of onigiri. Don't spin your knife like that, I'm a professional. But with all that out of the way, let's talk about the Punk Hazard arc. Alright, I'm just going to put this down now. Alrighty, so the Punk Hazard arc. Now, the Punk Hazard arc was important and it was interesting, but not because of the specific story that happened on Punk Hazard, right? Punk Hazard was what I like to call middle book syndrome. And I've brought this up in another few of the One Piece reviews that I've done. Because the fact is, it doesn't matter how great of a storyteller you are or how great the story that you're telling is, at some point you're going to have a middle book syndrome part in that story. And for anyone that doesn't understand what middle book syndrome is, think to any trilogy that you've ever read, right? The first book is usually pretty damn good. The third book is usually pretty damn good. The middle book, however, tends to be a lot more lacking. It's more about setting up the story, it's more about explaining a bit more from the first book and kind of tying up loose ends, but also throwing out plot points and throwing out threads to unravel in the third book so you can have a much larger payoff. And that's exactly what Punk Hazard has done, right? So obviously I have no idea what's coming in the future because I haven't read anything past Punk Hazard yet, but it's pretty easy to tell that Punk Hazard was all about explaining who was where after that 2-year time skip, and all about setting up future plot points, like about Luffy saying to Law that he wants to take down all of the Yonkou, or Yonkai, or however you say that word. I'll look it up on Google after I do this, so forgive me if I say it wrong for this video. But also we learn a bit more about Dr. Vegapunk. We don't get a lot of first-hand information, but we find out a lot of second-hand information about him, and about Caesar, who was his offsider and did that big poison explosion and did all his stuff that he did. So we get a bit more information about Dr. Vegapunk. We find out Law's become one of the Shichibaki. We find out Don Flamingo has also become one. Luffy and Law start their own alliance to take down the pirate emperors and all that. So there's a lot of plot points that are thrown out. We find out those other three of the, what was it called? I believe it was the Terrible Generation. We find out that another 3 of them came together and formed their own alliance. So there's a lot of plot threads thrown out in this one. Not to mention in the one before, we still have that Luffy picked a fight with Big Mama. So all that still has to pay off as well. So this one was just all about throwing out those plot threads, getting all of that information out there, getting all of the information just in your head, so that way when it all starts happening and things start paying off, they feel good and they feel earned. Now, after that rant about middle book syndrome and all that kind of stuff, this was still a great arc. I enjoyed it, I enjoyed the story told, and there were some big moments in it. So I want to talk about one of the bigger moments that I thought happened in this story, and that was everything to do with Smoker and Tashigi, right? So I've said a few times that I really like Smoker, I really like Toshigi, I like their whole dynamic, I like their dynamic with the straw hats. You know, everyone is always after enemies to lovers, but I always like enemies to allies, I love that trope, and this arc was all about that. Now, one of the things that I found really interesting is Toshigi's growth in this arc, right? Because in the last arc and in this one, you get the feeling at the beginning that her Marines don't really respect her that much, right? They say things like, my beautiful captain, our captain is very attractive, but it's not the same way that they respect Smoker, right? Like, they might respect the rank, so to speak, but they do not respect the person. And I feel as if this arc was all about Shigi going through that and earning that respect of her Marines. And there's a few really interesting ways that this happens. First of all, there's the gender swap between Smoker and her. That happens, and then you kind of see how everything unfolds there. We see her men throw her through the gate and sacrifice their own lives in order to get her through, and then the Marines yell back, like, we got her through safely, and you see all of her men die, but they're just like, yeah, they're just like, peace, yeah, we did it, we saved our captain's life. So, another huge respect moment from there. But also, we see the moment where Zoro and Toshigi are fighting the harpy woman, and she tells all of her men, like, she says to everyone, go, get out of here, I'll handle this. And her and Zoro stay to fight the woman, which was a huge moment for me as the reader. That was the moment where I was like, damn, she is a badass mother fudger. You know, before that moment, she's just kind of that nerdy sword girl, and she does show that after that fight, and Zoro chucks her over his shoulder and is running, and she's like, wow, is that really the legendary sword, blah blah. And the final moment I wanted to address was when she's being carried by Zoro, and she's like, look, carry me, you're faster than me, I get it, let's do it, but when we get to my men, you need to drop me. This is embarrassing, my men can't see me like this. And it's just, it's such a dynamic of, it shows that the men earned respect for her, and she is trying to be someone worthy of their respect, because at the end of the day, respect is a two-way street, right? So I really enjoyed her growth in this one. One of the really interesting things that happened in this one was that moment between her and Zoro when they were fighting the harpy woman. And she called Zoro out on not being able to cut women, or not being able to deliver the finishing blow to women. So she said something along the lines of, you may never lose, but you will also never win if you do not have what it takes to deliver the finishing blow to a woman. And I thought that was really interesting. And when I read that, I was like, that's kind of weird. Isn't Sanji the one that's kind of weird about fighting women? So that felt really out of the blue, because it shows Zoro's like, it shows a flashback where he first meets her and he refuses to fight her because he's like, hey, you know, you have the face of an old friend of mine, I'm not going to fight you, who do you think you are, running around with her face? And then I guess after that moment, I don't think we ever really see Zoro fight another woman, because in Alabasta, he fought the guy that has the knives for arms, or he could turn into a sword, or whatever his specific power was, and that's when we're like, Zoro figures out how to cut things he wants to cut, but also not cut things that he doesn't want to cut. That was like that whole haki thing back then. He fights the blue-ringed octopus in the Fishman Island. He fights, you know, a couple of other swordsmen, but I don't think he ever really fights another woman after he has that interaction with Toshigi. So that was really interesting for me, because in my head, my perception of Zoro was because of his friend that was a woman that trained with him and, you know, did all that. In my head, I thought Zoro perceived women as like equal opponents because of his friend. And maybe he would consider it a disrespect to his friend to not think of women on the same level. But now I'm wondering, because Zoro is so strong, because Zoro is so like strong like bull, because he's so powerful now, does he consider it like an unfair fight? He's like, look, I don't want to just slice you up, I'm way stronger than you, this is just unfair of me to just come in here and just kick your butt. So all in all, for that part, I'm saying I really appreciate Toshigi's growth in this, and I was confused by that whole thing that happened with Zoro, and I really enjoyed that she called him out on it, especially because like when the harpy woman comes in and she's got that big monster form, and Zoro slices her down in half, onigiris her in half, he doesn't do it with the haki, so he very well could have, like, finishing blow, sliced her in half, but he chose not to, proving Toshigi right, and then she cuts the harpy down just as the harpy's coming after Zoro, and Toshigi's like, look, I told you, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You did not slice her down, you did not cut her down, you have the ability, you chose not to use your haki. And Zoro's there and he's like, yeah, I was about to, just before you stepped in. If you hadn't, I would have haki sliced her down in a moment. And she's like, you can't say that after the fact, you must have done it in the time. So yeah, I guess what I'm getting at, I really appreciate Toshigi now. I liked her before, but now I'm like, yeah, she's cool, she's OG, I like her. And I really like Toshigi and Zoro's chemistry and dynamic, and I really hope we get a lot more of, like, their story. because I think that they could really feed off each other and give us a lot of like funny, heartfelt, you know, I think that they could really create some very interesting stories out of a Zoro Toshigi kind of lone arc or whatever. And one last thing before I move on, to make a prediction, I think that by the end of this story, Smoker will die, and I bet you Toshigi will adopt Smoker's personality after he dies, right? Because there are a few photos or a few like panels or whatever where you see Smoker as Toshigi, and she's sitting there and she's got like the, you know, big dog sitting stance with the cigar hanging out, and she looks cool, right? Like she looks hella cool when she's sitting there with like the cigar hanging out and the sword across her, and she's just like there looking like a big dog. So I think that by the end of it, Smoker will die and Toshigi will take over his command, because that's how it works, Battlefield Promotions, and she will continue to lead the men and will then adopt Smoker's like big dog personality. Alright, now moving on from there, we get you know, the samurai and his son. I never learned how to pronounce the samurai's name, so I won't even try. But more importantly, he tells us about a country named Wano, or Wano country, I think they call it. That's really interesting because it is the land of samurai, so I imagine that we will get a lot of really big Zoro moments. And I have a feeling that like whenever they mention a specific place, the Straw Hats will go there. So I imagine the Straw Hats will be going to Whole Cake Island, DeRosa, or DeRosa, DeRosiosa, or something, and Wano country. So there's like 3 countries that the Straw Hats have to go to now. But one of the really interesting things that Wano, it's the land of the samurai, it really put into perspective for me that Zoro is not a samurai. Zoro is just a swordsman, right? Like, that was something that like didn't click to me until this moment when they were like, oh, we specifically have something called samurai in One Piece. And I was like, that's really interesting. And then I kind of thought about what a samurai is, and a samurai is a person that belongs to a specific master, right? Because a masterless samurai is called a ronin. So Zoro wouldn't be a samurai because he doesn't have a master. Anyway, I don't really think that that means anything or has any kind of specific correlation to anything. I just wanted to point out that in that moment, my brain was like, oh, Zoro's not actually a samurai. Zoro is a swordsman. And all these other people that we've been coming across, although they've been under Japanese influence, they've just also been swordsmen. They haven't been samurai yet. So it'll be really interesting to go to Wano and see like real samurai. In this arc, we also learn about SAD, the gas that Caesar can produce, although we never actually find out what the acronym for SAD is, or if they did tell us, I must have missed that part, because at this point, I don't know what the acronym for SAD means. And we also learn that Don Flamingo, is using SAD to create artificial devil fruit, which is a pretty cool concept. And I'm hoping, as we explore more of what is artificial devil fruit and how it works and blah blah blah, I'm hoping that we can find out more about what exactly is devil fruit. Like, where does it come from? Like, what are its origins? Does it grow on a tree? Is it produced by, you know, the ocean itself, and that's why people can't swim because it's made from just the ocean, or, you know, whatever. It'll be really interesting to find out what exactly devil fruit is. I imagine it's got something to do with the lost history, though. And I guess I should mention the Beastmaster. What was he? Mr. 100 Beasts or something? That was the Yonkou that they're going to go and fight. Now, I have a feeling that when they go and fight him, that there's going to be something like the artificial devil fruit will start like messing with people's biology, and it'll make them sick, or they'll start dying, or they'll start turning into like monsters that can't control the animal inside or something. Surely there's got to be some kind of side effect to these artificial devil fruit, right? Like, it can't just be exactly the same as a devil fruit. It has to have some kind of side effect, especially because they're made out of poison, right? Like, it's, you know, poison turned into an artificial fruit, so it must have some kind of negative consequence to these people. Okay, moving on, I wanted to talk about a couple of the panels, so I'm going to throw this one up here, right? Now, when I originally downloaded this panel, or saved this panel, I titled it, That's Dark, right? So this moment is where the two assassins are coming and they're trying to kill the Straw Hats. They're trying to get the kids back, and the Caesar guy told them, kill Brownbeard. He's just become a nuisance. I don't need him anymore. Just get rid of him. Just kill him, right? And then this happens. And I originally saved it as that's dark, because like they just walk in, point blank, shoot him in the face. Now, I was expecting Brownbeard to have died here, right? That's why I was like, oh, geez Louise, that was dark. They just, like, executed this guy. Like, I knew that the new world would probably get darker from here on, but I didn't expect it to just be, like, this dark straight away, right? But we obviously know that he's not dead because he's still alive at the end of the story. There's all that other stuff that happens, right? This, for me, is kind of getting a little bit, like, I'm not enjoying the fake-out deaths, right? There's been a lot of just, like, you know, people that you think would have died from XYZ, but they didn't die, right? It's starting to get, like, hard to track the story, I guess. You know, like, as the reader, I'm there, and I'm like, oh no, what'll happen here? And then all of a sudden, the guy that you thought died in Act 1 is now here back in Act 3, and it turns out he didn't die. He was just badly hurt. And the thing is, it happens a lot. And it's starting to get, like, a little bothersome. But, moving on to this one here, we can see the explosion when the Marines set that slime on fire when it's all gathered onto the boat. And it's like, boom, and explodes. And we see all of those Marines die. Now, that is, like, one of those dark moments that I was expecting in the new world, and it isn't one of those moments where it's like, oh, hey, actually, it turns out they were all still alive. No, these guys are all dead. That boat exploded, and now these people are dead. And I guess I'm just ready for things to get a little bit darker now. I'm ready for things to get a bit more grittier now that we've entered into this more serious time. And I feel like now, after the time skip and, you know, Ace's death, I feel like everything was meant to pick up more. Like, I feel like that entire saga before the Red Line was everything just kind of slowly ramping up, and things got, like, darker as things ramped up. And then it hit that point, and now things have kind of gone down a little before they have to go back up. This one here is also a big one for Toshigi. I feel like the fact that she's just swapped back into her body is a big one. Like, it might have been some kind of residual Smoker thing, like that might have been it. But she does talk back to Smoker, which for her seems like a huge thing, because she seems really like chain of command, respect these people, do this, do this. So for her to, like, yell back and be like, you're doing it wrong, this is our only course, seems like a big deal for her to speak out against her chain of command. Again, another big moment with her and Smoker is Smoker goes off because he's going to fight with the mole, the traitor of G5, his boss, and Toshigi's like, no, we gotta get out of here, blah blah blah, why are we doing this? And Smoker's like, no, you can't come with me, because if you come with me, then who's going to lead these Marines? And essentially passes on his command to her, which you can see in that last panel. She's like, because, you know, that's a huge milestone for him to be like, you're in command, I'm going to go and do this other thing now. This is the last panel I wanted to talk about, and it is the one where the little girl eats all the candy. Now, generally I don't like kids in stories. It's just like a, you know, they're generally pretty annoying and all that kind of stuff. But this one, I was like, okay, cool. Like, when she eats all of those candies so that none of the other kids can get to it, even though she knows that she'll probably die if she eats them all because of the poison in them, I was like, okay, she's pretty cool. I like this girl. And I just wanted to mention that moment. So a lot of other really interesting things did happen in this one. You know, there was Sanji, how he, you know, protected the Marines. He went back and he started kicking them all through the gate when the poison gas was coming. You know, he was protecting Toshigi. The Marines started liking them. There was the thing at the end where they all set up that barrier, like, don't look at him, don't look at him. And Toshigi's like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, stop that now. And the Marines are all like, no, if we keep looking at them, we're going to start liking them because they're cool. You know, all that was really wholesome. I really enjoyed that. You know, people love enemies to lovers, but I love enemies to allies. I think that's such a great trope. You know, so a lot of really interesting stuff did happen in this one. But this arc was really all about all of those plot points it was throwing out. It was all about that interesting information and setup for the arcs coming. Like, for example, this one ends with Don Flamingo stepping down from the Royal Shichibaki, right? So, you know, all this crazy stuff is coming. This one was all about setting that up, and I'm really interested to find out what happens next. I don't even know where they're going next. generally at the end of these they say, okay, cool, now we're off to Alabasta, or we're off to wherever we're going. They didn't do this at the end of this one, so I don't actually know where they're going next. Thank you for watching this video all the way this far. My next video will be coming out on like Thursday next week, or Wednesday, depending on where you are in the world. You know, all the YouTubers seem to release their video on the same day. I don't know if you've noticed that, like if you're following a bunch of YouTubers, but they all tend to release their videos on the exact same day, and it's like Thursday morning at 6 a.m. or something, or like Wednesday morning, depending on where you are in the world, of course. Anyway, cool. So my next video will be that next Thursday at 6 a.m. or whatever, when all the other YouTubers release their videos. But anyway, thanks for watching, thanks for caring, like, subscribe, leave a comment till we meet again, and as always, thank you very much.